Okay. We'll give it one more minute for people to get in, get settled.
Yeah. So is it broadcasted live or it's not live?
Behcet hocam, we are live on YouTube right now.
Okay.
Yes.
I wish I had known that. I would have let my kids know, but anyways.
Okay. You can always send them the link. They can join if they'd like
Oh,
to.
okay. Do you have the link? Can you share it in the chat so I can send it?
Let me share the link in one.
I'm not sure if I can make it in time, but let's see. Maybe it will work. Something happened. All right. Let me try to. Oh, this is the YouTube thing, right? Okay. Give me a second. I'll try to send this. All right. See what happens. I'm ready now. Thank you.
Okay, let's get started.
Yeah, sure.
Welcome to the Acikmese School Chapter's April Career of the Month webinar featuring Aerospace Engineer Dr. Behcet Acikmese. Today, we are going to feature the speaker and ask questions and learn more about what his job is and what he did with NASA. And each of our high school chapter members will ask a question. And if you have any questions as audience members, you can always ask them in the chat and they'll be answered later in the order received. But without further ado, I'll let Ezgi do speaker introduction.
Hello. Okay, so for the speaker introduction, we have Professor Acikmese. He went to Middle East Technical University and to study civil engineering, and later on got his master's in mechanical engineering and PhD in aerospace engineering at Purdue University. And he's now a professor of aeronautic and astronautic department at the University of Washington. So if you have any opening words, I'll give that to you now.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I hope you guys will find this discussion useful. I'm trying to assess how the questions will be and so on, but maybe what I can first describe is a little bit of my specific expertise in aerospace. I am a professor of aeronautics and astronautics, but my specialty is automatic control systems. You may know this field because of some applications you are interacting as we speak. For example, whenever you get on an airplane, most airplanes are flown automatically. Pilots do certain things, but majority of operations, control of the airplane is done by onboard computers. And there are software and algorithms that control that vehicle during flight. And most spacecraft are autonomous. They are not remote controlled. They have to be controlled with onboard computers and so on. There are many applications of automatic control systems. What we do is we use nowadays mostly digital platforms, i.e. computers, to control vehicles by using real-time sensed data. All right. For example, you may be hearing autonomous cars. Again, automatic control system engineers work on these applications too. Drone delivery, you may be hearing. I mean, it hasn't happened yet, but it may happen soon when you will see, instead of Amazon trucks, maybe drones flying around and delivering stuff. Again, there will be control of those vehicles autonomously. There are a bunch of other applications too. So my specialty is in that area. Just to give you a rough idea, maybe that helps you form your questions or maybe make you curious about stuff.
Okay, thank you. So for this webinar, we have a set of questions that we already prepared.
Okay.
And then ask those, and then we'll go into the audience if they have any other questions or clarifications. So for the first question, we have Khan Atak from Northville High School. Okay, I'll just ask that question.
That's okay.
Were you always interested in the topic of aerospace engineering or engineering in general?
Not necessarily. When I was about, you are high school students mostly. So when I was about your age, I was probably more interested in physics, more interested in science than engineering. Engineering is the application of science to, mostly it's technology, not the science part of it. Of course, we leverage a lot of science, but that was not my interest originally. But then, time and some decisions I made put me in engineering. Aerospace engineering came a bit late, actually, in terms of when I decided to be one. I wanted to study automatic controls after a point in my life. It turned out that the professor I wanted to work with during my PhD was in aerospace engineering. That's literally why I ended up in aerospace engineering, not because I was dying to be an aerospace engineer. But then that was maybe a lucky coincidence for me. Then my first job was at NASA Jet Propulsion Labs, JPL, for about 10 years. That's where I really became an aerospace engineer, where I practiced it too. It wasn't just the research part, but real applications. So that's where I really became an aerospace engineer. A bit late in my life, I must say.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we have Elida from Stevenson High School.
Hello, I'm Elida. I'm a ninth grader at Stevenson. And my question for you is, what type of educational path did you take to get to where you are now?
My educational path is a little bit unusual. I mean, it's not completely unrelated, but unusual, let's say. After high school, I went to university to study civil engineering, which is kind of maybe one of the least related fields to aerospace, or the field that I'm working, the subfield, automatic control systems. For example, I never took a course in automatic control systems during my first 4 years of college, during undergrad years. Okay. And then after I graduated, I went to mechanical engineering. I wanted to study something a bit more computational, more mathematical. I did my master's in mechanical engineering, specifically in computational fluid dynamics. I'll throw some names. It doesn't have to make sense, but if you are interested, you may dig it up later on, particularly in some area called finite element analysis. Then I started my PhD in, again, mechanical engineering. But then at that time, again, by maybe somewhat by chance, I was taking a course in controls because of some specific interests I had. Then I loved that field. I literally quit my PhD at the time in mechanical engineering and jumped ship to aerospace engineering because I wanted to work with my advisor, who became my advisor, in controls field, automatic controls field. And then I started my PhD again from fresh, I would say, with actually very little knowledge of automatic control systems, but a lot of skills in mathematics. That really is, and physics, I would say. That really was the advantage I had, maybe. I picked up things very fast that way. Then that's where I finished my education. Of course, after I graduated with my PhD, I started working, during my professional years at JPL, later on in academia, first in UT Austin, University of Texas Austin, now in University of Washington, Seattle. You keep on learning, but my core education was a bit not that straight of an arrow in terms of where I ended up versus where I started, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Our next question is going to be from Izki again, from Huron High School.
Okay, my question was, what is the most interesting part of your job, or the part you enjoy the most, and why?
I love solving math puzzles. I always liked it, even as a kid. This job presents math puzzles, math problems, physics problems, also similar physics puzzles all the time. It's every project is more or less unique. It's not a there's no cookie cutter type how do you say it, manual to do some of the things we do. Every job that I take on pretty much is unique. And dealing with unique problems, with new aspects, it's really entertaining. I could have done this as a hobby. I'm doing it for a living, which is really great. I really enjoy it. And nowadays especially, there are many applications of this my field. Again, all kind of autonomous vehicles being proposed for future. From self-driving cars to autonomous drone delivery of goods to space applications where I have a lot of experience landing on other planets, new autonomous spacecraft doing exciting science, or they may have also commercial applications. So they all present unique challenges in different operational environments. And I pretty much enjoy everything I do, which is, I guess I'm fortunate.
Okay. Next we have Defne Levi from Seaholm High School.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and my question is, could you walk us through a day in your schedule?
Oh, sure. I have a bit strange schedule. Actually, for me, this time is quite early. I'm a late worker. I have actually collaborators all around the world. So sometimes I stay up late, so I wake up late. Typically, I start my day around 10:30 a.m. I have a lot of meetings, typically till maybe 3, 4, 5 p.m. Then I take a break. Then I actually start doing work. Meetings are not always, to do work. It's to sometimes communicate what's going on, understand what your team members are up to, and so on. Of course, there are technical discussions too, sometimes interesting ones. Then after maybe an early dinner, I start going back to things I do by myself. If I'm working on a problem or I'm working on a paper, because I'm an academic, I'm a professor, so I write papers. I write quite often. So I go to those things after dinner. Maybe I typically go, not maybe with high intensity, but I go working up to sometimes midnight. And I spend some time with my kids too during that time, hopefully. And then the day repeats itself. I don't have any day. Maybe on Sundays I don't do any work, or very little work, let's say. That's typically how it goes.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is from Mehmet Tasçoğlu from Northville High School.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, what went through your mind when the Atlas V rocket you worked so hard on launched into space?
Actually, I didn't work on the Atlas rocket. I worked on Curiosity rover, meaning that what I did was used at the very end of the mission, when not at the mission, but at the very end of the flight part of the mission, when Curiosity landed on Mars first in 2012. Later on, Perseverance recently landed on Mars. Actually, I was maybe in Perseverance landing in February. I wasn't terribly nervous because I already the same algorithm and software worked successfully landing Curiosity about 9 years ago, 8.5 years ago. So this time I had more confidence, and we had some, we felt better about these things. But when it happened for the first time in 2012, August of 2012, it was much more, uncertain whether everything would work and so on. That's when I felt, how do you say it? Before the landing, I didn't feel really terror or panic, like, oh, it won't work or anything like that. But maybe quite a bit of, maybe a little bit of anxiety. when it landed, it was more of a relief first, then excitement. Before the landing, maybe just to deal with the anxiety, we were more numbed. And also, as a controls engineer, what we do is not like 10,000, or maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe 10 guys are working on a software and you are working on a part of it, that does something at a certain time. It wasn't like that. What I did was directly responsible for a certain phase of the landing. So if anything went wrong during that part of the landing due to not controlling the vehicle properly, it would have been me that would have been the guilty party, let's say. So in that way, we got a lot of recognition, but if things went wrong, we would have gotten a lot of blame too. So taking that responsibility was a bit, it made people nervous, including myself. There was maybe 7, 8 engineers who worked in all control systems. There were 4 fundamentally different ones. And all of us felt the pressure, but, maybe we were a bit numbed, and we worked hard, to prepare. So we were hoping that everything would work, but when it worked, it was really a relief. I felt more after the landing, not before the landing, if that makes sense, because I was trying not to feel too much.
Thank you. The next question is from Izgi Poyraz from Huron High School.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nice.
How has COVID-19 affected your work or the field you work in?
I mean, of course, it's not desirable or fun to work with people, via Zoom or something else. It's best to interact with people one-on-one. But having said that, for practical reasons, I don't think it impacted me too much, actually. It turned out that it helped me to organize better and so on in a strange way. Of course, again, it's not desirable. I have students, PhD students, that I work with on a regular basis. And I couldn't interact with them as much as I could. I would like to, or they would like to. Now every interaction you have is organized. There's no spontaneous interaction like when you are in in university. You walk in the corridor, you meet people, you start talking. That doesn't happen anymore. I think it's not very conducive in that way, obviously. But on the other hand, it wasn't a major derailment either, at least for the type of work I do, because again, there may be one component where some students, a few of my students work in a lab where we actually implement some of the algorithms on board test vehicles. That activity was a bit, that activity slowed down significantly. That's maybe the only direct impact I had. But otherwise, since most of our work is with mathematics, algorithms, and so on, you can do it from practically anywhere.
Okay, next we have Elida from Stevens.
All right, my next question for you is, how do you see the aerospace field changing over the 20 years?
How it's changing. First, let me start with the way it changed in the last 20 years. And I'll hopefully project, maybe inaccurately, who knows what will happen next. But in the last 20 years, aerospace has gone through maybe another mini renaissance, or a major renaissance. There were a lot of private companies doing things that typically governments did in the past, like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others. Especially SpaceX maybe was the most public, has been the most public company in terms of new technologies that they develop, new missions that they took on. I think that's quite a shift. I mean, that means that there are more commercial applications of space industry and technology, and I believe that will continue. I hope that will continue because that presents more opportunities for new and young engineers, even not so young engineers like myself. For example, nowadays, I think I have been in, I know of different universities. Aerospace engineering is one of the most desirable engineering disciplines among new students coming in our undergraduate program. I think two top departments that are sought are typically aerospace engineering and computer science. This is more or less the case wherever I went. This wasn't the case 30 years ago. So I think one reason is, again, the revival of, or not revival maybe, but this new, this new development that private industry is heavily involved in exploration and other applications of aerospace applications, in space particularly. And again, maybe you heard, SpaceX was chosen by NASA to take human beings to Mars, and not Mars, sorry, Moon soon, hopefully. I mean, all these companies developing all these capabilities, in-house capabilities. I mean, it will, I think it will revolutionize aerospace engineering even further. And space engineering part, the aerospace, aero part is on Earth, like airplanes and so on. Space is spacecraft and missions to other planets, maybe to low Earth orbit. And, I think space part is the most exciting part to a lot of young people. That's what inspires people. At least that's what I have seen. So I really am hopeful about the future. I'm really excited about the future, even for myself, and definitely for younger engineers and now high schoolers who want to be aerospace engineers. It's exciting to be alive now.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to Mehmet, hopefully to start some questions.
Okay, so at this portion, we'll move on to the questions in the chat, and we encourage the audience to ask questions in the chat. The first one that we see is, how is your experience working at JPL?
I mean, JPL, as I said, I really learned how to be an aerospace engineer, particularly space engineer. I worked with amazingly talented people. JPL has, in some areas, one of the only experts in the world. It's such a unique place. You go in, there are about 5,000 people who work there at the time I joined. I don't know what the numbers are, but it must be more or less the same. And you would find experts from all kind of different areas, and that gave me an amazing opportunity to interact with them. Even experts in my own area, who I learned a lot from, but also experts in other areas that really enriched me intellectually, and also in terms of my capabilities as an engineer, how I parse problems, how I deal with them, how I prioritize what's important, what's not, technically, of course. It was an amazing experience for me in that way. Also, JPL gave me an opportunity to tackle some problems. That's where I started making maybe one of several of my most important contributions in terms of, both flight missions like, MS Mars Science Lab and Mars 2020 landing Curiosity and Perseverance, but also in terms of developing new technologies, some of which are adopted by companies like SpaceX. I made some important contributions, and it wasn't, if it couldn't have happened if it wasn't my position at JPL, where I was exposed to all these problems and a lot of expertise around me. So it was a major game changer personally for me to have the opportunity to work at JPL.
The next one we see is there any way we can get in contact with you via email to ask questions after this? I think we can address that.
I have my email. I may not be the greatest person in responding to all emails. So if you want to take the risk of not getting a response to your first email, don't give up. Send me emails. I'll try to respond. But also you can find resources on my website. Again, there are a lot of resources these days beyond me that you can refer to, available online. I would really encourage you to, for example, go to JPL's website. JPL is an amazing public website where you can dig into a lot of things. Sometimes I forget the details of the mission that I worked on. I go to JPL's website and dig into because I might not have directly worked on a part of the mission. That's how I learn things. That's how I at least get started. Then I have friends, of course. Then I directly contact them sometimes if I want to learn more. But JPL's website is great. I think SpaceX has also a decent website in terms of public outreach. I mean, I encourage you to dig into those too.
And just a quick question on clarification. I got a message in the private chat. Can you clarify what JPL is?
Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, is the acronym. There are several NASA centers, I believe 10 of them. These are major R&D, research and development centers, where things happen. JPL is a historically very significant center in the following way. It is the main center for robotic exploration of the solar system. All right, that's its primary job. It does other things too, but that's its primary job. There are other centers, as I said, like Goddard, like Johnson Space Center, Armstrong Space Center in California, and not Space Armstrong Flight Center, I think that's called. I forgot it. Recently they changed the name. So there are like Ames, NASA Ames on the East Coast. There are several of those. Glenn in Cleveland, and so on. JPL is one of them, but maybe one of the most important ones. Yeah.
Okay. And so the next question in the chat is, what tips would you give to a high school student who wants to be an engineer and possibly pursue aerospace engineering?
I mean, first of all, I mean, maybe the most important thing is to have a personal desire to do those things, my main recommendation to young people is don't do what you are asked to do what you want to do. Hopefully something good, of course. Something that you will enjoy, intellectually grow and build a career, hopefully that's what you want. Engineering is what you want. If that's what you want, at least in the field that I have been working on, I think developing your basic skills is a good idea. Those include, maths, physics, things like that. Thinking independently in those areas, being creative in those areas, having core skills well established. All these things will help you during your career.
Okay. Next question is, what is your current project that you're working on right now?
I have several of them. I actually more than several. In the school, I have several jobs, actually. It's interesting. My main job is, of course, being a professor. I have several research projects centered around autonomous vehicles and control of autonomous vehicles. Specifically, space and air vehicles, airplanes, drones, whatnot, and then in space, spacecraft, landers, planetary landers, and so on, rockets. And research, academic research I do built around this team, let's say. My second job is I'm also a technical lead at NASA Johnson Space Center for a project called SPLICE. It's a technology development project for a new set of algorithm software and sensors for planetary landing. It's called SPLICE, the acronym for it, SPLICE. I am leading a team of guidance control engineers to develop some capabilities that will eventually be tested on Moon, hopefully. That's our hope, if everything goes well. I do also consulting work by myself. I consult commercial companies, particularly in the area of aerial drone delivery and control of aerial drones and so on. So 3 jobs: one my academic job, one my NASA job, which is temporary. It's for a couple of years, and I do sometimes consultancy on the side too. Seattle is a very high-tech place, so there are opportunities of all kinds.
Okay. The next question we see here is, what are some goals you and your team have that you want to achieve in the future?
Make things more autonomous. There are a lot of reasons to doing so. In the future, vehicles will do a lot of things by themselves. It will go beyond the bandwidth of a human being to handle all the considerations that they have to deal with. So autonomous vehicle operations in different fields, from space to air to ground, or even underwater, will be I think a key technology area that will grow, and that's where I want to be making my contributions. If that makes sense.
Yep. The next question here is, what type of different career opportunities exist within the aerospace engineering field?
I mean, there is the standard answer. There is the jobs in industry, government, and academia. This is typically the case. Aerospace has a significant government part. Though JPL was not, we weren't directly NASA employees. We were actually Caltech employees at the time, but we were working for NASA. We were considered part of the government ecosystem of engineering, space engineering, for example. That's a good example to government part of things. But there is also private industry like SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, the Boeings, and so on. And then for academic jobs, if you want to be a professor, you can eventually do your PhD and so on. And I wasn't a professor initially, but I came back, became a professor. So there are all kinds of opportunities these days. Hopefully, if industry grows, there will be even more. But as aerospace engineers, especially if you do your master's PhD, there may be others too. I have had friends who worked in financial industry. Because we develop a lot of mathematical capabilities and computational capabilities. Some of these skills are useful in other fields too, as I said, one of my colleagues, for a while he was doing stock trading. A lot of those things are also done automatically. Algorithms handle a lot of things, and it's also a different type of control problem. So people in my field sometimes find themselves in that kind of area too, So it's a core area. I think you develop a lot of useful core skills, and then you apply directly in the aerospace field, but you may be able to apply it in other fields too.
Awesome. So there's another really good question in the chat. Can you talk about the process of a project? How is a space project started and completed?
I see. There are different phases for a project. First, it starts as an idea, a proposal, let's say. People propose missions, like for example, for space missions to other planets or whatnot, Then there is some preliminary analysis phase where people assess the feasibility of this mission. And if there are it's a scientifically driven mission, what are the scientific returns versus what is the budget we need to make it happen? And do we have the necessary engineering technologies to make it happen? What do we need? That's first analyzed. Then there's another layer of analysis and design, which is what we would call maybe roughly a preliminary design phase, where the right design concepts are analyzed. Let's say let's say we decided on the mission, but now for different, maybe for the mission or its subcomponents, people propose different ideas on how to get it done. This is the preliminary design phase, let's say. Once a design is chosen, they say, okay, we will do here for these subcomponents, components, we will do these things. Once people decide on that, then there will be more detailed design, and that the fidelity of the design will improve in time. Eventually, at some point, there will be a building phase. They will build the spacecraft and so on. But these days, it's not only the physical spacecraft that is important. There is a lot of software. That's where I live, on the software domain, not on the maybe hardware as much. There's a lot of software that's being built too. So those things happen over a pretty long time, let's say.
The next question I see is, would it be possible to travel at light speed in the near future?
I don't know. But I think, coming close to light speed is definitely plausible. How close, I don't know.
And then what are some of the tools that allow for you to monitor the rover on Mars when it's miles away?
I mean, we have a lot of sensors on the vehicle, which constantly beam information back to Earth. Also, there are some, spacecraft around Mars which were put there a long time ago, and they monitor the surface. That's how we gain a lot of information about Mars constantly. So both onboard sensors, and communication devices, as well as the existing spacecraft around Mars, give us information. But with a delay. It's not instantaneous information. It takes about 12 to 14 minutes to receive signals back from Mars. It's so far away.
Cool. So kind of connecting to Turkey here, are you currently involved or will you be involved with the recently established Turkish government space agency?
I haven't been involved in that development. I have colleagues who I collaborate with in Turkey, but not with those folks.
Okay. And then I see a question here. Regarding autonomous driving on the ground, what are some of the challenges?
I mean, again, that's not something that I directly work on, but I know quite a bit about. I mean, one of the challenges is vehicles interacting with people, safety. Sensing the environment by the vehicle, interpretation of what's sensed, and then doing the right thing. All of these things are challenging, very, very challenging, because if you make a mistake, you may hurt people. That's what makes it quite a challenging application. And there will be all kind of autonomous vehicles on the ground, them interacting with each other, setting up an infrastructure, supporting such a system. All these things are major challenges. I think there's a lot of money being invested as we speak. A lot of companies are being formed. They are trying to tackle all these challenges, but yet we haven't reached to an end that people feel comfortable with, or to a point that we feel comfortable with. So it's a challenging problem, mainly due to safety.
So going along that same question then, is it easier to do autonomous driving in the air?
Maybe in some ways, because air is, you have more space. There's no direct, people are not flying themselves, we don't have wings, so it's more or less likely to hit someone. But the problem is in air is that you need to fly. Flying is not easy. Now we take it for granted, but it's not an easy thing to do. You can't just, for example, if traffic is stuck, you stay, in a car, you just sit there and nothing happens. You don't hurt anything. Nothing will happen to you, most likely. But when you are on air, you can't just indefinitely hover, right? You have limited fuel. You have winds, gusts, things like that can bother flight. Flying is always more challenging, physically more challenging problem. That's why certain things that's easy in driving is very difficult in flying, just because of the physics. But there are advantages too. You have more space.
So you had mentioned earlier that you would do your job as like a hobby. And so what do you like most about your job?
Solving problems. I like solving problems. It's like if you are into puzzles, you would know what I mean. I mean, they present you a puzzle that has to be solved. There are good reasons that people want to solve it. Personally, I find it in many cases intellectually stimulating, but also, I make my living through doing that, which is great. I couldn't ask for more.
Right. It's always more fun to do a job that you like versus one you don't like.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. And so the next question here is, are you working in a space simulated lab? How is it a space simulated lab?
Oh, simulating space is very, very difficult, in some cases impossible. What we do is we have a lot of mathematical models that simulate space, if you want. And we do the simulation in software, Again, that's an idealization of what may happen, but we try to make it as realistic as possible as aerospace engineers, and then test many things in advance or in simulation sometimes. In numerical simulation, or computer simulation. But of course, we do that, but we also try to do physical testing and simulation as much as possible. Maybe we won't be like landing on Mars. We cannot, test this on Earth. It's a completely different environment. But we still do some testing. We did a lot of drop tests for the rover, with coming down from the sky crane. Certain phases of if you are familiar with the landing on Mars. So a lot of things are still being tested on as much as possible. The components are being tested as much as possible, but we do a lot of testing via simulation too.
Okay, and then once again, I want to provide a reminder that you can put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute and ask them as well to the speaker in between questions.
What do you plan on doing? Like, do you have any like long-term visions for yourself?
Personally, I'm probably I'll still stay in university for the rest of my life. But I like getting involved in actual applications as well. I have a lot of experience, still useful to people. I'm typically pulled to something. Not always I can predict what it would be, but I like being involved in applications, in industrial applications. I think that mix of academic research and actual applications will continue for me, hopefully. I want to be relevant to what's going on. Hopefully, I can sustain that for a long time.
Okay. So you had mentioned earlier that you kind of wanted to do it more discussion. Anything you have for us, Professor?
Oh, for you, again, I may repeat myself, but do what you want. Find something you like to do that makes your life, at least professional life, meaningful. Doing a grunt job where you are just doing it just to get a paycheck, it's fair. People do that. We have to do that. But if it's at all possible, try to find something that you like. It makes your life more meaningful. And you wake up every day with more enthusiasm, and it makes people happy. So that's what I would say. Again, but doing what you want is not just wanting it doesn't make it happen. You have to put the work too. But it's easier to put the work when you want it. All right.
Mm-hmm. And so the next question here from the chat is more on like an outside level out of the job. What are your hobbies and what do you do in your spare time, if any?
I have spare time. I like walking around. I love Seattle, a beautiful city. Whenever I have chance, I start walking miles and miles. I don't drive much. I try to not drive at all. But also, when I was a bit younger, I did a lot of sports. I used to like playing volleyball, basketball, which I still do it, but I'm not as good. Those things exponentially decay after a certain age. So I have to find some new hobbies. So I also like traveling. I spend a lot of, due to work, I travel quite a bit anyways. But again, I would have done it if I had the chance, if let's say work didn't require it, but even in that case, I would have liked to travel, but now it requires it. So maybe it's still a hobby, traveling, experiencing new cultures, working with different people from all over the world. I spend some of my time in France every year. I have some colleagues I collaborate with. It's great. Every time I go there, I get a lot of pleasure meeting them, visiting France. Then I visit, of course, Turkey and other places too. That's for more personal reasons, but I enjoy doing that.
And then the next question here is, how long does the average space project take from start to finish?
Oh, that all depends. That all depends. Because especially government-driven projects depend on the government's budget too, and depending on the political environment, sometimes certain projects priorities change in time. So, there are some projects, nobody knows when they will finish. They always have some objectives, but sometimes they get, delayed. It's really a hard question to answer. But years, typically a big, what they call flagship NASA missions, for example, take years to finish. How many years? Again, it's hard to predict or know. I don't have also an average number of it takes so many years.
Right. And I guess a follow-up to that is does the government work well with you and your project? Are they quick to provide like the funding and those types of things?
Yeah, the government, government has to do things with an accountability. That's that's the main thing for them, right? They are responsible to taxpayers. So things cannot happen in light speed, to be sure, because they want to make sure everything is spent properly. But for me, they have been great. They have funded my work. Government has funded my work from different sources. Most of the research work in United States is being funded by government, not by private industry in many cases, but not by private money. Most of the people are educated thanks to government funding. Most of the masters and PhDs are paid from grants that came from government. So government plays a significant role in the current engineering ecosystem, let's say, especially in the R&D domain, research and development domain.
Cool. The next question here is how do you balance work and life?
I don't try to balance it as much. Hopefully, I try. It happens naturally sometimes, but sometimes pushing yourself, giving breaks is a good way to do it. Spare some time for yourself and family and other friends. But again, it depends on the demands on you. Sometimes it becomes really hard to do that, but you have to do it. Otherwise, time flies away. It's a resource that you cannot recover again.
Yeah. And one question I got on the private chat is more on society based. How does our society and culture think about space exploration? What are some of the dangers that you may anticipate with space exploration?
Dangers? Sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't
I
hear.
guess just I can
Okay.
repeat it one time.
Yeah, sure.
How does our society and culture think about space exploration, and what are some of like the risks or obstacles that you
I see.
anticipate with space exploration?
I see. I think overall people's attitude towards space exploration is extremely positive. Space exploration doesn't bring you something right away. In many cases, it happens maybe in long term. But it's an essential component of society now. Think about it. Without communication satellites, without space industry, many things you take for granted nowadays wouldn't have happened. These are non-trivial things, If you think of it, humanity 200 years ago versus now, it's just we are in the sci-fi domain of a person even 100 years ago. And space industry is an integral part of it. And I think people overall appreciate that. That's at least my anecdotal observation. I didn't do research on that, but I think people, think about when SpaceX does anything, people love seeing those things. When we land on Mars, people love seeing those things. Of course, there are some cynical people. In anything, there are cynical people. But I think overall, the attitude towards space technology and exploration is extremely positive all around the world. Even people who may not, for political reasons, not like United States, when US lands stuff on Mars, people really appreciate that all over the world. I think that it has a unifying effect for humanity in that way too.
That's very cool.
So it seems like we ran out of questions. But in any case, if you, as I said, if you want to learn more, JPL's website is great. Hopefully, the human question, will there be humans living on Mars? Potentially, maybe not in my lifetime. I hope in my lifetime, but maybe in your lifetime. Hopefully.
Okay.
A question. Oh,
Oh, sorry, go.
a question I had was, it was kind of similar to that. What do you think about commercial like transportation like into space? Is that something that we can anticipate for like in the future, maybe in like our lifetimes?
It's already happening. Things are being sent back to and forth to space by like SpaceX, and other commercial entities. It may grow. It may grow more. There are other uses of space, for example, for broadband internet, like maybe you have heard SpaceX Starlink mission. Again, SpaceX website, Blue Origin website. Blue Origin is a company in Seattle. Again, they are working on delivery of human beings to space and for commercial reasons. And so on. I mean, they have. I would encourage you to explore their websites. And other more traditional aerospace companies like Boeing, Lockheed, all of them has a good piece of information about how do they contribute, and through that they discuss aerospace technology and its applications.
Right, and it's definitely one of the most expanding industries out there. And another question here is, have you met a person named Mark Rober? He worked at JPL.
No, I don't know him.
And then a question here says, which simulation software do you typically use to simulate space?
I mean, we develop our software typically in MATLAB, which is a high-level programming tool, let's say, scripting tool, or Python. Maybe you are more familiar with Python. These days is being used a lot. Then most software eventually is written in C or C++ for flight reason purposes. Those are typical, software development, infrastructure, tools we use, let's say.
Okay, seems like we're approaching the end of the webinar. I think I'll hand it back to Ezgi to do a closing statement.
Thank you.
Oh, there's one more question. I know there's a program called SETI.
Oh yeah, I saw the question. Is there any progress in search for life? Not I know. I don't follow SETI. I don't know if they found anything yet.
Okay. So I think we're done with the questions for today. So if you have anything else to say, like a closing statement of anything,
Again, do what you want, and hopefully some of you will want to be an aerospace engineer and contribute to this area. Thank you for inviting me.
Yep, thank you for coming and speaking. We want to thank the TUCOM board as well and the TUCOM Education and Outreach Committee for helping make this possible. And thank you to you, Professor Acikmese, for coming today and speaking. And yeah, so
Thank you for inviting. And good luck.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Have a good day, all.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
you too. All right.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.